Well, Graham, look, thank you very much for your time today. Just quickly, what's your first impression of this budget? It's been described by Andrew Bolt this morning in the Herald Sun as a Labor budget.
Well, it's a zombie version of a Labor budget, and if you look at the detail, you'll see that it's a pure Tory budget. Sure, they whack a bit of a tax on banks, but they also give banks a tax break, and the top end of town a big tax break. $50 billion that we can't afford. We hear that the economy's under pressure, and they're finding it hard to pay for services, and so they're going to increase the Medicare levy. In fact, the percentage of tax to GDP is Turnbull's going to be the Prime Minister, if he lasts that long, of the greatest imposts post-war, basically, on the Australian people. We're going to have a budget. I remember Malcolm Turnbull standing in front of a debt truck saying, "Look at Labor." When we're in the low 300s, he's going to be hitting $550 billion in terms of debt. It's debt visited on my children, my grandchildren, and the like. And who are they attacking? The old usual whipping boy going after the sick and those on welfare. It's not a Labor budget. I guarantee you that one.
I didn't think so, but I was in the chamber last night when Scott Morrison was making his announcement, and my first read on it was that it sounded very much like a Keynesian budget, in a way. Pump priming with all the infrastructure spend and all that kind of stuff.
Infrastructure spend. Let's look at what they're doing.
75 billion, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but look at the actual money. He mentioned Cross River Rail, which is something that has implications for the Gold Coast and my electorate in the southern suburbs of Brisbane. But it doesn't actually. There's no line item in the budget. He talks about it as something that we might consider in the future. And in terms of dollars rolling out into to pay for people to put a shovel in the ground, the money's just not there. Bit of stuff for the Gold Coast in terms of the Commonwealth Games.
But that's window dressing, isn't it?
Well, I was going to say, as Australia should, we're putting on the Commonwealth Games. We want to do the right thing. It's also a great tourist destination, a great message, a great chance to market our all that we provide to the world, not only on the sporting field, but obviously in terms of services and products and things we grow. I'm not impressed with the budget.
What about the
detail?
Well, but let's talk about the Melbourne-Brisbane rail line then. That's something that, you could imagine someone like Curtin or one of those old Labor greats doing something like that as a nation-building exercise.
Look,
why has this government just picked on that right now then?
Well, it's obviously the Nationals have had some influence because it'll bring benefits to rural Australia. I think it will bring benefits to all of Australia. Don't get me wrong. I'm largely supportive of this, it's been kicking around for 20, 30 years, Martin. So I'm not going to pop out the champagne just yet.
Well, Badgerys Creek has as well, hasn't it? And that's
I'll wait and I'd like to see them putting that golden spike through the last rail before I crack open the champagne.
And maybe we could fly to Badgerys Creek and then catch the plane up to Brisbane and get the train back to Melbourne.
That's right, yeah. But look, they do seem to have hardened up their commitment to those projects.
I'm trying to think of a 3-word slogan for this budget because the government loves those. And I thought trains, planes and dole bludgers or something like that.
Well, it's a little bit of that, and tax and spend is what Peter Credlin called it. The journalist and former advisor to the former Prime Minister. But it's bad taxes. Some of the things are bad taxes and sort of some bizarre spending decisions in there.
I was talking to ACOS this morning, Australian Council of Social Services. They're very critical and they say they won't support any of the harsh measures attacking welfare recipients in this budget. One of the things they pointed out to me is how much money they're actually going to spend on policing people on the dole that could go into other things.
Yeah. Well, and if the Treasurer opened his speech today at the Press Club talking about, effectively that we've got some revenue issues. If you think you're going to extract revenue out of tightening up the sick and the damaged, there's no fat there. There's no, in terms of from a human point of view. Obviously, I'm very worried about the extra stress associated with this, but there's no magic, pile of money there that people are hoarding and costing the taxpayer. You know, and they make some very, very brave assumptions about wages growth. You know,
well, there hasn't been any for how many years have we not had any wages growth?
Since we've been measuring wages growth, this is the flattest, lowest time. And in fact, you could argue in the last quarter that wages actually went backwards.
Well, and with what the government's doing through Fair Work, with penalty rates and stuff, and it's not
silent on that. The penalty rates is a classic example where the government is silent. We've still got their backbenchers saying, we need to get rid of penalty rates. The cheer squad to get rid of penalty rates are there. And who does that affect? You know, some of the lowest paid who rely on penalty rates to just get through on week-to-week basis. And who else are they going after? University students. You know, hardly, that's not a fatted calf at all. And it's actually the economic return on universities in terms of productivity gains is perhaps going to be undermined by this attack on university students.
We were talking about this last night at the press club. We were in a discussion watching the coverage last night, and one of the things we kind of thought of a line is that basically what's happening here is we're putting the future even further into debt here now. That we're shifting the burden, the generational debt burden, away from the baby boomers. It's almost like baby boomer revenge on the millennials.
It's and effectively nothing there in terms of opening up the housing market for millennials. I mean, the sort of window dressing a bit of...
Well, that tax, the super fund idea is $30,000 isn't going to get you anywhere, and that's the maximum.
Not in the Sydney and Melbourne markets.
No, I mean, 50k's out of a CBD, you might buy a house for $300,000, but...
And we're not supportive of that. We effectively, superannuation is a separate process. Superannuation, the trustees hold your money for your retirement. Look, the negative gearing was the thing they needed to address. I think some things that deal with bank culture rather than profiting from the bad culture of banks, which is what they're effectively going to do by whacking this extra levy on them. If they actually attacked some of the culture that creates those profits, that would be a much.
But they can't do that, can they? Because that would attack. But that would go right to their business base, wouldn't it? If they put a Royal Commission onto banks, which is Labor policy, they're going to undermine their credibility with the big end of town. And Collins Street won't like that.
Well, Malcolm Turnbull, fundamentally a merchant banker, and that merchant banker crown wasn't knocked off his head by last night's budget.
It wasn't. Now let's just.
He pretended it was.
Yeah.
He pretended it was.
That's right. That's right. As I said, Andrew Bolt described this as a Labor budget. You're saying it's purely a Tory budget.
Dressed up Labor. Look at the details and you'll see it's a Tory budget. Yeah,
I think you're right about that. But what does that say to you about how the politics is going to play out now? Because Malcolm Turnbull has been under pressure now. I mean, this is a replay on the Conservative side of the Rudd, Gillard, Rudd. Will she, won't she, will he, won't he kind of stuff that went on destabilise the Labor Party for so long. This isn't going to keep Malcolm in that job until the next election, is it, do you think?
Well, he made it very clear on the day he engineered the coup against Tony Abbott. The KPI for continuing prime ministership is 30 news polls. He's made that very clear, that's when there's an open door policy for challenges. He's getting
close.
Well, I think he's over halfway. I'm not sure. I don't follow the polls that closely, but it's problematic. Now, will this be this sort of dressed up budget? Will it be enough?
It might be a bounce for one news poll, but it's not going to go much beyond that cycle, is it?
Australian people smell whether people are genuine. That's something that they've done. In 2004 I was a candidate under Mark Latham. The Australian people got a whiff of what he was really like, and they smelled it much better than I did. As it turned out, they always get it right. I think with Turnbull, fundamentally, the man does not believe in anything.
We've turned off him, do you think, then, the electorate?
Well, what Australian people respond to is genuine. The genuine. They might not have ever loved John Howard, but they knew that what he stood for was what he was. Similarly with Tony Abbott, they might not have liked his policies, but they knew what Tony Abbott was. He's not a beast wearing a mask. He is what he is. But I think we see with this husk of a man that is the current Prime Minister, he's trying new visages, trying new strategies, shuffling the cards around, trying to pretend, look here, look there. But fundamentally, I think Australians have worked out this bloke does not stand for anything. And I think Australians, when they make that decision about you, you can't come back. You can't come back from that fundamental decision. You can't. There's not enough bribes you can roll out in a budget to get people back when they've fundamentally marked your cards as not being.
There's not enough bribery in this budget, is there? It's not a pay up. It's not a bribe before the election budget. This one.
No, it's not the 2004 budget of the 2006 budget of John Howard. They were spending like a drunken sailor. The one the IMF said was the most, made them the most profligate economic managers in the history of Australia. Look, you've got Cormann and Morrison as your salespeople, but I don't think you'd need to be a salesman extraordinaire to sell this. Once you look at the details, and you're coming off a base where the Australian people are already very wary of you. So schools is a classic one. That's the battleground for most aspirational Australians. So to cut this much and then give this much back, but it still end up being a net cut of $20+ billion. I mean, people will be like, well, that's not. My maths is pretty straightforward, but that's not. That shows you don't really fundamentally believe in education.
So can Labor benefit then in the next 18 months from this basically just a kind of nothing hollow budget?
I think Labor is best when we are courageous when it comes to policy. We went to the last election with some things that, as a marginal seat holder, I found a little bit courageous, like negative gearing and things like that. But Labor is best. We're a party of reform and innovation. We've got to look after our base, obviously, in terms of health and education. But we are a party who, in the last 40, 50 years, all of the economic transformation of this nation has occurred under Labor policies. The budget last night didn't provide any of those. Anything new and innovative. Okay, the rail line. Well, people have been talking about that since the late 1800s. In terms of using rail, we need to be a little bit more adventurous because we've got some pretty difficult headwinds coming our way out of Asia, out of Europe, out of Brexit, and the like. So I think we need a better, steadier hand on the tiller than what Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison announced last night.
Thank you. Just finally, before I let you go, Peter Slipper a few weeks ago was given the honour of having his portrait hung in the gallery out here in the public area of Parliament House. It was a pretty emotional day. I know you were there and I was there for that, for Peter and a number of other people. And Michael Yabsley actually gave quite a good speech.
Pretty passionate speech from Michael.
What's your view on all of that now? I know you had something to do with helping with the investigations of Brough and everything.
Yeah, look, Peter and I are from different tribes, but as a human being and as lovers of democracy, we have very common values. When you strip it all down, he is a lover of democracy, and I've got to say, when he sat in that speaker's chair, he was a bloody effective speaker. He was a great speaker. On all occasions, whether he was in the Liberal Party or as independent, he always called it right in that chair, and that's some of the highest praise you can give to a member of this Parliament when they're sitting in that chair to do a good job, because it's a tough job. But look, I don't think hanging a picture will make up for the heartache and misery and horror visited on Peter by some nasty people. But at least for perpetuity, at least for his family, I was glad to see all his family there on that the day of the unveiling. I think he can be proud of his efforts as a parliamentarian, and I'm hoping that history will be kinder to him.
Speaking of history, is it a bit ironic that he's now out of this building and James Ashby is in here now as an advisor to Pauline Hanson?
Probably best I don't comment too much. But I'm not a big fan of Mr. Ashby.
Thank you. Silence is very evocative.
Look, and his strategy and his grubby fingerprints are over so many, all over so many political manoeuvrings that One Nation are attempting. I'd ask people to have a look back at One Nation and say, all right, for 21 years, Pauline Hanson has been receiving taxpayer funds for the political process. Detail what she has achieved in those 21 years. For all of that money, I'm not sure if you've ever totaled up all of the money that has gone towards One Nation. Where's the NDIS? Where's the labour market reform? Where's the free trade agreement? What has she delivered for the Australian people for the 21 years that the taxpayers of Australia have given her money? And the answer is it's not zero, it's less than zero. Less than zero.
It would be a negative sum, wouldn't it?
Well, she's created
the harm,
fear, division,
yeah.
And that's. I mean, I entered political life because I like helping people. What has she achieved?
Graham Perrett, thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.